The sun had just begun to rise over Kambala, casting a golden glow across the tall buildings and noisy streets. In the heart of the city stood the grand offices of Kamau Holdings, owned by the famous businessman Mr. Kamau. People respected him, feared him, and spoke of his sharp mind and quick temper. He had built his empire from nothing and was proud of every brick, every chair, every coin he owned. That morning, everything seemed normal. The workers arrived early, greeting one another with sleepy smiles. Asha, the cleaner, entered quietly through the side door, carrying her old broom and bucket. She was a humble woman, always dressed neatly even though her clothes were worn out. She loved her job because it helped her feed her 2 children. She believed in honesty, in hard work, and in doing things right, even when no one was watching. Inside his office, Mr. Kamau unlocked his safe to take out some money for a business trip. But when he opened it, his heart stopped. The thick bundle of cash he had kept there, $20,000, was gone. He blinked, opened the drawers, searched every corner, but the money was nowhere to be found. His hands began to shake. He slammed the safe shut and called his assistant. "Who came in here yesterday?" he shouted. The assistant stammered, "Only you, sir, and Asha, the cleaner. She came to tidy up like always." The name made his anger rise. "A cleaner?" he growled. "A poor woman who earns so little, of course." She saw the money and couldn't resist. Without another thought, he called all the workers to the lobby. His voice thundered across the room. "Someone has stolen from me. $20,000 from my safe. I will find out who it is, and that person will regret it." The workers exchanged worried glances, whispering among themselves. Asha stood quietly at the back, clutching her broom. Her heart pounded in fear. She had done nothing wrong, but she could already feel eyes turning toward her. She stepped forward slowly and said, "Sir, maybe the money was misplaced? Perhaps it fell or—" "Silence!" Mr. Kamau shouted, his face red with anger. "You were in my office. You cleaned near my desk. You touched the safe." Asha's lips trembled. "Yes, sir, but I only wiped the dust. I didn't open anything. I swear I didn't." But her words only made him angrier. "Enough of your lies," he barked. "I trusted you in my office, and this is how you repay me?" The other workers stood frozen. No one dared to defend her. Asha felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of them. She folded her hands and said softly, "I have worked for you for 5 years. You know me, sir. Please believe me." But Mr. Kamau's pride was stronger than reason. "Get out," he said coldly. "You are finished here." The room went silent. Asha's heart broke. She looked around at the faces she had seen every day, the secretary who sometimes shared lunch with her, the guard who joked about football, but no one met her eyes. She bent down, picked up her broom and walked toward the door. Her legs felt weak, but she didn't stop. Outside, the morning sun felt harsh and cruel. As she walked down the busy street, she heard the city's noise, cars honking, vendors shouting, but it all sounded far away. Her thoughts were full of pain. How could she prove her innocence? How could a poor woman fight a rich man's word? Tears ran down her cheeks as she reached her small home at the edge of town. Her children, Nuru and Juma, came running to greet her. "Mama, you're home early," they said cheerfully. She forced a smile, not wanting them to see her sadness. "Yes, my children," she said softly. "Mama just needs to rest today." She sat on the bed and buried her face in her hands. Her chest hurt from the weight of the accusation. The words of Mr. Kamau echoed in her mind, "Liar, thief, get out." She had worked honestly for every coin she earned, and yet in one moment her name was ruined. Back at Kamau Holdings, Mr. Kamau sat in his office, still fuming. His assistant asked carefully, "Sir, are you sure it was her?" He frowned. "Who else could it be? Only she had the chance." "But sir," the assistant said quietly, "Asha has always been loyal. Maybe we should search again." Mr. Kamau waved him off. "No need. I know what I saw. Poor people can't resist temptation." He said the words sharply as if to convince himself. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that something didn't feel right. That night he couldn't sleep. The thought of Asha's tearful face haunted him. He turned in his bed, telling himself he had done the right thing, but his heart wouldn't settle. Still, his pride stopped him from admitting he might be wrong. Meanwhile, Asha lay awake too. She worried about how to feed her children now. Her savings were small and her name was stained. Who would hire her again? She prayed softly, "God, you know I am innocent. Please show the truth." The next few days were hard. Asha sold some of her old clothes in the market to buy food. Her neighbors whispered, some with pity, others with suspicion. She looked honest, they said, but you can never tell. Each word cut her deeper. But she held her head high, refusing to let shame destroy her completely. Mr. Kamau returned to work as usual, but something had changed. His workers avoided talking about the incident, but everyone could feel the tension. Every time he opened his office door, he found himself glancing toward the safe. The emptiness inside it seemed to mock him. He hired new cleaners, but none of them worked as carefully as Asha. The floors no longer shone the way they used to. He found himself missing her quiet presence, her polite greetings, her steady work. Yet he told no one. A week later, while going through old business files, he noticed one drawer slightly open. He pulled it out to close it and something caught his eye. A white envelope lay stuck behind it. He reached for it and his heart skipped a beat. He opened it slowly. Inside was a bundle of cash. He counted it once, then again. It was the missing $20,000. For a long moment he just stood there, frozen. The truth hit him like a storm. The money had never been stolen. It had been misplaced by him. He sat down, the envelope trembling in his hands. "Oh no," he whispered. "What have I done?" He saw Asha's face again in his mind, her tears, her pain, her quiet dignity. Guilt burned inside him like fire. All his pride, all his anger, suddenly felt small and foolish. He realized he had not just taken away her job, but her peace, her reputation, and her dignity. Mr. Kamau closed his eyes and sighed deeply. "I must make this right," he said softly. And for the first time in years he felt the weight of his own actions. Outside, the city of Kambala moved on as usual, cars honking, people shouting, life rushing forward. But inside Mr. Kamau's heart, something had changed forever. Asha walked slowly through the streets of Kambala, her heart heavy and her eyes full of tears. The sound of people talking and cars passing by felt far away. Her mind was filled with shame and pain. She could still hear Mr. Kamau's angry voice calling her a thief. Each word cut her like a knife. She had worked so hard for years, cleaning his office, taking care of every corner like it was her own home. Yet, in one moment, all her honesty had been thrown away with one cruel accusation. When she reached her small house, the evening sun had turned red, painting the sky like fire. The little building stood quietly at the edge of the road, its walls old but strong. Her children, Nuru and Juma, ran out to greet her, smiling as they always did. "Mama, you are home early," Juma said, holding her hand. Asha forced a weak smile. "Yes, my son," she said softly. "Mama just needed some rest today." Inside, the room was small but tidy. Asha sat on the wooden stool near the window, watching her children play. Her chest felt tight, but she didn't want them to see her pain. "Are you okay, Mama?" Nuru asked, her big brown eyes full of worry. Asha nodded and said, "I'm fine, my dear. Just tired." But inside, her heart whispered, "How will I tell them the truth?" That night, after putting the children to bed, Asha sat alone. The oil lamp flickered weakly beside her. Her thoughts were heavy like stones. She looked at her rough hands, hands that had worked for years to keep her family alive. She had never stolen, never lied, never done wrong. Yet she was treated like a criminal. The next day she went out early trying to find small jobs. She washed clothes for rich families, swept dusty yards, and carried water for neighbors. Every coin she earned felt heavy, but she was grateful for it. "I will not let my children go hungry," she whispered to herself as she worked. However, the neighborhood had changed. People whispered when she passed by. "That's her," some said softly. "The one who stole from her boss." Others stopped greeting her. Even those who once smiled now turned away. Asha tried to ignore them, but the words hurt deeply. Each whisper reminded her of the shame she carried for something she did not do. At night, when she lay down to sleep, she would close her eyes and see Mr. Kamau's face again, cold, angry, certain. "You are a thief," he had said. The memory burned her heart. Sometimes tears would slip down her cheeks as she prayed quietly, "God, you know I am innocent. Please show the truth." Meanwhile, far away in his big mansion, Mr. Kamau sat by his window, unable to rest. His house was beautiful, full of expensive furniture, but it felt strangely empty that night. The ticking of the clock on the wall sounded louder than ever. He had everything, a big business, fine cars, respect from everyone, but peace was missing. Every time he tried to close his eyes, he saw Asha's tearful face. He got up and poured himself a glass of water, but even that didn't calm him. "Why am I thinking about her?" he muttered. "She stole from me. She doesn't deserve my thoughts." Yet deep down he wasn't sure anymore. Something inside him felt wrong. He had been so quick to accuse her. What if he was wrong? But his pride stopped him from admitting that thought. The next morning he went to work as usual, wearing his fine suit and serious face. His workers greeted him politely, but he barely responded. When he entered his office he felt uneasy. He looked at the safe again, the empty space where the money used to be. For a moment he thought about checking his papers again, but he shook his head. No, he told himself firmly. I already know what happened. Still, throughout the day his mind kept wandering. He couldn't focus on his meetings. He snapped at his assistant for small mistakes. When the phone rang he jumped. By evening his chest felt heavy with something he couldn't explain. That night he sat in his large living room staring at the wall. His sister Miriam came to visit. She noticed his silence and asked, "Brother, what troubles you? You've been restless for days." He sighed. "It's nothing," he said quickly. Miriam raised an eyebrow. "Nothing? You look like a man who lost sleep and peace. Tell me, is it about business?" Mr. Kamau hesitated. "It's about a worker. I fired someone last week. A cleaner. I thought she stole money from my office." Miriam frowned. "You thought? So you're not sure?" "She was the only one who could have done it," he said, his voice rising slightly. "Who else could it be?" "Did you find proof?" she asked calmly. Her question made him pause. "No," he said slowly, "but I didn't need proof. The money was gone after she cleaned my office." Miriam sighed deeply. "Brother, that's not proof. You've known that woman for years, haven't you?" "Yes," he admitted quietly. "And she's been loyal?" "She has." "Then maybe you judged too quickly," Miriam said softly. "Sometimes the poor are blamed because it's easy to blame them." Her words struck him deeply. He didn't reply. For a long time they both sat in silence. Finally Miriam stood up and said, "Think about it, Kamau. Pride builds high walls but truth breaks them." Then she left, leaving him alone with his thoughts. That night he couldn't sleep again. The more he thought, the worse he felt. He remembered how Asha had looked at him with tears in her eyes, still calling him sir, still begging him to believe her. He had shouted at her, humiliated her, and thrown her out without a second thought. Meanwhile Asha's life grew harder. One of her neighbors stopped letting her fetch water from the shared well. Another refused to hire her to wash clothes. "I can't have a thief in my house," they said coldly. Asha didn't argue. She just bowed her head and walked away. But there were still a few kind souls. An old woman named Mama Rahima gave her some food and said, "Don't lose hope, my child. Truth may sleep, but it never dies." Those words gave Asha a little strength. She worked harder, holding her head high even when people looked at her with suspicion. One evening, as she returned home carrying a small bag of rice, her children ran to her, laughing. Their joy warmed her heart. For a moment she forgot her pain. She hugged them tightly and whispered, "As long as I have you, I will keep going." Far away Mr. Kamau stood by his office window, staring at the city lights. For the first time in his life he felt truly poor, not in money but in heart. The image of Asha's honest eyes would not leave him. Somewhere deep inside he began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. Weeks passed and life in Mr. Kamau's grand mansion continued as usual on the outside, but inside he was restless. Every night he found himself staring at the empty space in his safe, haunted by guilt and doubt. The laughter of his workers in the morning no longer brought him peace. Even his meals tasted dull. He often thought about Asha, the way she stood trembling in his office, tears streaming down her face, swearing she was innocent. He tried to push the memory away, but it stayed like a shadow behind his eyes. One quiet Saturday morning the air was cool and the house was still. Mr. Kamau woke up earlier than usual. He didn't know why, but something pushed him to go into his private study. It was a room he rarely entered anymore, a place full of old files, papers, and business records stacked high on wooden shelves. Dust had gathered on everything. He looked around and thought, maybe it's time I tidy up. He rolled up his sleeves, opened the curtains, and began to sort through his desk. The light from the window fell across his expensive books and family photos. As he wiped the surface, he came across a small pile of papers that had been lying untouched for months. He started going through them slowly, contracts, receipts, letters. After some time he opened a drawer he hadn't touched in ages. It was stuck and he had to pull hard to open it. Inside were more papers and a few envelopes. He sighed and began pulling things out one by one. Suddenly, as he reached for a stack of folders, something small slipped from behind the drawer and fell to the floor. He bent down to pick it up, and froze. It was a brown envelope, slightly dusty with his handwriting on it. His heart skipped a beat. He recognized it instantly. With shaking hands he tore it open. Inside were neat bundles of money. He counted them and his eyes widened. It was the missing $20,000. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. He stared at the money, unable to move. The truth crashed over him like a wave. Asha had been innocent all along. The money had never been stolen. It had been misplaced, hidden behind his drawer all this time. He sank into his chair, his head in his hands. A deep silence filled the room. The clock ticked on the wall, each second louder than the last. Shame burned through him. He remembered that terrible day when he had accused Asha in front of everyone, how her voice had trembled when she said she didn't take it, how the workers had looked at her with suspicion, and how he had turned his back on her without a single thought. He whispered softly, "What have I done?" He sat there for a long time, staring at the envelope on his desk. Guilt filled every corner of his heart. He realized now that his pride, his anger, and his wealth had blinded him. He had destroyed a woman's reputation, taken away her job, and hurt her dignity, all because he was too proud to question himself. His mind went back to what his sister Miriam had said that night: "Pride builds high walls, but truth breaks them." Now he understood those words completely. His pride had built a wall so high that it blocked his own sense of right and wrong. After a while he stood up and began pacing the room. His steps echoed softly on the tiled floor. He thought about Asha's children, the way they must have looked at her when she came home that day. He imagined the whispers in her neighborhood, the people pointing fingers, the doors that were closed to her. He felt sick. He knew what he had to do. He had to face her. He had to apologize, not just with words but with action. Before leaving the room, he looked one last time at the money on the table. It seemed useless now, a pile of paper that had caused so much pain. He placed it carefully back in the envelope and held it tightly. Later that day he called his driver. "Take me to Asha's home," he said quietly. The driver looked surprised. "Sir, Asha the cleaner?" "Yes," Mr. Kamau replied. "The cleaner I wronged." As the car drove through the busy streets of Kampala, Mr. Kamau looked out the window. The city that once looked bright and full of energy now seemed different. The tall buildings, the shining signs, the expensive cars, all of it felt empty. He realized how easily wealth could make a man forget the value of another human being's heart. When they reached the poor side of town, the roads grew narrow and dusty. Children played barefoot by the road. The driver stopped in front of a small house with a tin roof. Mr. Kamau got out slowly, holding the brown envelope in his hand. He stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. The air smelled of wood smoke and wet soil. Asha's home looked humble but clean. He could hear the faint laughter of children inside. He took a deep breath and walked to the door. But before he could knock, he stopped. What would he say? How could he face her after all the pain he had caused? His throat tightened. Part of him wanted to turn back to escape the shame, but another part of him, the better part, told him that he had to do this. He knocked gently. After a few seconds the door opened and Asha appeared. She looked thinner than before, her face tired but still kind. When she saw him, her eyes widened in shock. For a moment neither of them spoke. "Mr. Kamau," she said softly. "Why are you here?" He couldn't meet her eyes. "Asha," he began, his voice shaking, "I came to make something right." She looked confused. "Sir, I don't understand." He held out the envelope. "I found the money. It was never stolen. It was in my drawer all along." Asha stared at him, her lips slightly parted, not believing what she was hearing. "You found it?" she whispered. "Yes," he said quietly. "And I realized I was wrong. I accused you without proof. I destroyed your name, your peace, and I came here to ask for your forgiveness." Tears filled Asha's eyes. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she said softly, "I told you, sir. I told you I didn't take it." "I know," Mr. Kamau said, his voice heavy with regret. "And I didn't listen. I let my pride blind me. I am deeply sorry, Asha. I don't expect you to forgive me easily, but please, know that I am truly ashamed." Asha looked at him for a long time. Then she sighed. "Sir, I have suffered. My children have suffered. People stopped trusting me. But I am not your judge. If you are truly sorry, may God forgive you." Her words were gentle, yet they cut deep. Mr. Kamau felt tears sting his eyes. He bowed his head, whispering, "Thank you, Asha." For the first time in years he felt humble, truly humble. As he turned to leave, Asha stood quietly by the door, watching him go. She didn't shout or curse him, she simply let silence speak for her heart. As Mr. Kamau walked back to his car, the sun began to set behind the hills. The city lights flickered on one by one. but inside him something had changed. He had found the truth, and with it, a painful but powerful lesson about justice, pride, and the cost of a single accusation. The morning sun rose slowly over Kambala, painting the sky with soft gold. The air was cool, but Mr. Kamau's heart burned with a strange mix of fear and guilt. He hadn't slept all night. The image of Asha's face, the shock, the tears, the quiet hurt, haunted him. Every minute that passed reminded him of the wrong he had done. He had built his life on respect and power, yet one careless act had shattered someone's dignity. Now he was going to face the woman he had wronged. He stepped into his car, his driver waiting at the gate. "Sir, where to?" the driver asked. Mr. Kamau hesitated before answering. "To the eastern side of town," he said quietly. "To Asha's home." The driver looked surprised but said nothing. The car engine roared softly, and they began the long drive from the rich hills to the crowded streets of the poorer quarters. The city changed before their eyes. Tall buildings gave way to small shops, paved roads turned to dust, and the air grew thick with the smell of smoke and sweat. Children ran barefoot, women sold fruit by the roadside, and men fixed tires under the hot sun. When the car finally slowed near a narrow lane, everyone stopped and stared. Mr. Kamau's shiny black car did not belong there. Whispers spread quickly, "That's the big man from the city? Why is he here?" Mr. Kamau stepped out slowly, holding a brown envelope close to his chest. His shoes sank slightly into the dusty ground. He looked around and saw the humble houses, tin roofs, cracked walls, and clothes hanging from lines. It was a world so different from his mansion, yet it felt more alive. Children giggled as they peeked from behind doors, watching the stranger in a fine suit. Asha's home was small and simple, with a wooden door painted blue. He walked toward it, his heart pounding. For a moment he stopped, took a deep breath, and then knocked. The door opened a little and Asha appeared. She looked thinner, but her eyes still carried the same quiet strength. When she saw him standing there, her hands froze. "Mr. Kamau?" she said softly, unsure if her eyes were playing tricks on her. He lowered his gaze. "Yes, Asha," he said in a low voice. "It's me." She stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron. The neighborhood had fallen silent now. Even the children stopped playing. "Why are you here, sir?" she asked carefully, her voice calm but filled with caution. Mr. Kamau swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. "I came to say I am sorry," he said, each word heavy with truth. "I found the money, the $20,000. It was never stolen. You were innocent, Asha." Asha stared at him, her face pale with shock. For a few seconds she didn't speak. The world around them seemed to stop. Even the wind was still. Then her lips trembled as she whispered, "You found it?" He nodded slowly. "It was hidden behind a drawer in my study. I don't know how it got there, but I found it. I was wrong. I accused you without proof and I hurt you deeply." Asha looked down, tears welling up in her eyes. "Sir," she said softly, "you broke my heart. You took away my name, my work, my peace. My children cried because they saw me cry. I had to beg to survive." Her voice was calm, but her words cut deep. Mr. Kamau felt tears sting his eyes. "I know," he said quietly. "And I deserve your anger. I came not as a rich man but as a guilty one. I came to ask for your forgiveness." For a moment there was silence. Only the distant sound of goats and children echoed faintly. Asha wiped her tears and looked up at him. Her face softened and she said slowly, "Sir, you hurt me but I forgive you. Not because it was easy, but because God knows the truth." Her words hit him harder than any punishment could. Mr. Kamau bowed his head, unable to speak. His pride, the thing that had always defined him, felt useless now. In that small dusty yard he felt smaller than ever before, yet freer than he had in years. He looked up again, his eyes wet. "Thank you, Asha," he said. "Thank you for your kindness." Asha gave a small nod. "May God help you do what is right," she said softly. He opened the envelope and handed it to her. "This is your salary for all the months you missed, and more. It can't undo what I did, but it's a start." Asha hesitated, then took the envelope gently. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. He turned to leave, but before stepping into his car, he looked back one last time. Asha stood in front of her home, holding the envelope close, her children watching from the doorway. She didn't smile, but her face showed peace, quiet, calm peace. The people of the neighborhood watched silently as the big car drove away. They didn't know what had been said, but they saw the change in both faces, Asha's forgiveness and Mr. Kamau's humility. As the car moved through the narrow streets, Mr. Kamau looked out the window again. The same roads that once looked poor now seemed full of life, real life. He realized how little money meant compared to truth and respect. That night, back in his mansion, he sat by the window and looked at the stars. He felt lighter, though his eyes were still wet. For the first time in many years, he didn't feel like the great Mr. Kamau, the rich businessman. He felt like a man, a simple man who had made a terrible mistake and had been forgiven. He whispered into the quiet night, "Thank you, Asha, for teaching me what wealth can't buy." And as he leaned back in his chair, he closed his eyes, no longer haunted by guilt, but humbled by grace. The sun rose softly over Kambala, and the city began to stir with its usual noise and rhythm. But inside Mr. Kamau's mansion, the morning felt different. The guilt that had weighed on him for weeks was gone, replaced by a quiet peace. Yet something deep in his heart told him his journey was not complete. He had asked for forgiveness, yes, but he still owed Asha more than money or apologies. He owed her a chance to live with dignity again. A few days later, Mr. Kamau found himself driving back toward the same dusty road where Asha lived. This time there was no fear or shame, only determination. The people of the neighborhood noticed his car again, whispering and pointing, but this time, there was no tension in their eyes. A few even waved politely. When Asha stepped out of her home, she was surprised once more. Her children peeked from behind her, their curious eyes wide. "Sir," she greeted softly, "you came again." "Yes," Mr. Kamau replied with a small smile. "May I speak with you for a moment?" She nodded and led him to a small wooden bench outside her house. He looked around, the simple home, the cracked walls, the small garden Asha had planted near the door. There was beauty in its simplicity, and for a moment, he envied the peace of this place. "I came," he began gently, "because I want to make things right, truly right. I want you to return to work. You'll have your job back and I'll increase your pay. You deserve far better than what I gave you before." Asha looked down for a moment, thinking. Her hands rested quietly on her lap. The offer was generous, more than she had ever hoped for. But she slowly shook her head. "Sir," she said softly, "I thank you, but I cannot come back." Mr. Kamau frowned slightly. "Why not, Asha? You did nothing wrong." She smiled sadly. "Yes, but that job holds too many memories. Every corner of that building will remind me of how I was accused, how I cried. My heart cannot return there. What I want, sir, is not for myself. I only ask that you help others who are poor and honest, the ones who suffer like I did. Help them find work. Help them be seen." Mr. Kamau fell silent. Her words pierced through him like sunlight through fog. Here was a woman who had lost everything, yet she asked nothing for herself. She wanted only kindness for others. It humbled him in a way no business lesson ever could. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You have taught me more than any book or teacher ever did. I will do as you asked." From that day forward, Mr. Kamau began something new. He used his wealth to build the Asha Trust, a small foundation named after the woman who had shown him what true strength and humility looked like. The charity helped honest workers who had been wrongly accused, single mothers struggling to feed their children, and poor families trying to rebuild their lives. The first person he hired was a widow who had been dismissed from her job for something she didn't do. Then came a young boy who had dropped out of school to help his mother. Mr. Kamau found joy in helping them. Each smile he saw reminded him of Asha's words, "Help others who suffer as I did." News of the foundation spread quickly across Kambala. People who had once feared Mr. Kamau now spoke of him with respect. They no longer saw him as just a rich businessman, they saw a man who had changed, a man who had learned what true wealth meant. At every charity event, he would stand before the crowd and tell the story, not with pride but with humility. "There was once a poor cleaner," he would say, "whom I accused of stealing from me. I was wrong. She forgave me when she had every reason not to. Her name was Asha, and because of her, I learned that pride can blind the heart. True success is not about money. It is about compassion." People listened with awe and admiration. Some even cried. Asha's name became known far beyond her small neighborhood. And though she never sought fame, she became a quiet symbol of truth and forgiveness. Years passed. The city changed, businesses grew, and the Asha Trust helped hundreds of people find new beginnings. Asha continued to live her simple life, raising her children and teaching them honesty above all things. Sometimes when she walked through the market, people recognized her and greeted her with smiles and respect. She would simply nod and keep walking, humble as always. One afternoon, Mr. Kamau visited her again. This time he came without a car or an assistant, just himself. He found her sitting under a tree, peeling vegetables while her children played nearby. "Asha," he said, smiling. I wanted to tell you something. Because of your words, more than 200 people have found jobs and homes. You have changed lives. Asha looked up, her face calm and gentle. It was not me, sir, she said softly. It was God who used my pain for something good. He smiled. Still, you should know, you are the reason I live differently now. I used to think money was everything. But now I know that a kind heart is worth more than gold. Asha chuckled lightly. Then perhaps, sir, you are the rich one now. They both laughed quietly, and for a while they sat in peaceful silence, listening to the wind move through the leaves. When Mr. Kamau left that day, he felt a warmth in his chest that no amount of money had ever given him. He had found peace, not through wealth or power, but through humility and kindness. Years later, people still remembered the story. Whenever a businessman grew too proud or a leader forgot compassion, someone would remind them, remember Mr. Kamau and the cleaner named Asha. Pride made him blind, but truth made him see. And in every corner of Kambala, those words lived on like a quiet lesson, simple, powerful, and true. The elders would often tell their children, never judge by class or title. Even a billionaire can learn from a poor woman. And every time Mr. Kamau stood before young business owners, he ended his speech the same way. Don't let pride steal your kindness. Wealth means nothing without a clean heart. And he meant it with every beat of his now humble heart.